Anyone who's played Genshin Impact long enough has probably played a few flagship events. Longtime players remember a lot of good stuff throughout the years. There's Unreconciled Stars, which constantly gets recommended to new players interested in the story. There's the Golden Apple Archipelago, which was my first event in the game and very well received by the player base. Then, of course, we have Suspedo. But my favorite of them all has to be the recent Interdarshan Championship, precisely for this reason.
Finally! Our final contestant is Vahumana's representative, Hat Guy!
Just call me Hat Guy.
If you're here, then I don't think I need to tell you how fun some of these are. But not only are they fun, some of them have also made key contributions to the lore, which seem comparatively absent in the permanent sections of the game. So naturally it follows, there's always been a call for events to be made permanent. A lot of people want the event stories permanent, because aside from the Archon quests, the events have been one of the biggest contributors to both lore and character. For example, on the lore side we were first introduced to Scaramouche and the fake skies of Tevat mystery long before it was reintroduced in Sumeru Act 5. We also have most of Alice's in-game interactions in the events, and we have Albedo's backstory with the Imposter, the formal introduction of the Hexenzirkel, and much, much more. On the character front, there was the Kale and Sucrose friendship scene, which I will never not be salty about it being temporary. The Interdarshan Championship was basically Kabe's story but in a tournament arc, and then there's Summertime Odyssey, which probably did far more for the characters involved than anything else in the game, especially Xinyan. They gave Xinyan a good backstory in a freaking temporary event, in the complete absence of any permanent content for her in the game. So, point is, the past is filled with great moments. I could go on an endless rant about this, but I think if you feel the same way, then you already understand the message. What exactly is going on here, and why can't we have this stuff permanent? This is where we need to make a distinction to get rid of the obvious points. The issue here is that the stuff we want to see are deliberately entangled with event complications, like temporary minigames and maps, and if something important happens in them, then it should either also be recreated in the permanent game in some capacity, or it should just be a permanent quest itself. I made a video talking about Windbloom a while back, and I expressed disappointment at how players won't ever get the opportunity again to see Kale and Sucrose become friends and explore their social anxiety together. This is something I think had to be made permanent, especially in the complete absence of a hangout or story quest for Kale. I would find it somewhat awkward for these two to just meet up in the future and have the audience assume they befriended each other off-screen, or even worse, for it to never be relevant again. So anyone who feels the same thinks it should be permanently available. Not necessarily Windbloom the event, not necessarily the exact premise of everyone meeting in Mondstadt for Windbloom, but rather the important things that happen in it should be permanent. Let's take Albedo as another example. Albedo's story quest is permanent content, but it was pretty chill overall. We had some relevant developments with him. We also had Rosaria hanging around and annoying us for a bit, but it felt rather forgettable. Shadows Amidst Snowstorms, however, had the excitement, the suspense, and the engagement, together with the lore which I thought made for a much better story experience. Of course, naturally, we also learned way more about Albedo in that event than we did in his own story quest. Similar things happened with Kazuha as mentioned earlier. Kazuha's story quest released simultaneously together with Summertime Odyssey, and the event gave us far more. We got flashbacks, we had a domain with unique effects, we had other characters learning Kazuha's backstory together with him, while in the story quest, it was just about an angry sword spirit guy that
Give your body over to me, then offer me your body in exchange. Now, take me in your hand.
Sorry, my bad. Let's continue. So, you might know where I'm going with this. As of this recording, Genshin Impact has 38 story quests and 16 hangouts, which totals to 54 character-specific stories. Theoretically speaking, the sheer volume of story material that exists in all these quests should be plenty of space to build up the characters we already have in meaningful ways. However, that doesn't really seem to be the case right now, because, don't get me wrong, while I still enjoyed playing through most of these quests, many of them still feel unfortunately underwhelming and forgettable, especially if there is a much better event to compare them to, like Shadows Amid Snowstorms and like Summertime Odyssey. And this is where I want to take a jab at the concept of story quests and hangouts as a whole. Let's just set the whole thing aside for a second and only look at the empty space they occupy. If story quests and hangouts weren't a thing at all, and in their place were a collection of various side stories, like Shadows Amid Snowstorms, like the Interdarshan Championship, the Irodori Festival, Windbloom, etc., then instead of isolated stories that just deal exclusively with a single character, we would have this as a regular thing, which I think would be a lot better. When it comes to story quests and hangouts conceptually, I understand the aspect of us the traveler spending time and interacting with these characters. I also understand the dating connotations that come with some of them. Toma. But the issue ends up being that these quests are fairly isolated. When we're doing Yelan's quest, for example, we're just following Yelan around dealing with some NPCs. When we do Kazuha's quest, we're more so focused on some random sword spirit than Kazuha himself. And when we do Nilu's quest, we're solving some family trouble that NPCs have with other NPCs. A lot of the story quests, although well written and executed, ultimately don't stick around with us as much as events. There's very little that happens in them that carries over, and a big indicator of this is the fact that development is mostly dedicated in the NPCs who almost never show up in the game again. Like, when are you ever gonna see Takuya in the game? Yeah, remember him? That's right, he was a cool character, but he just never showed up again. I personally enjoy events much more than story quests, because when you bring together multiple playable characters together, like the Sumeru gang in Mondstadt, you create a lot of fun new character dynamics which help further build these characters. Like, you can never have enough of playable characters talking to other playable characters. See Alhaitham and Kaveh. And these are all playable characters. You know, the most heavily marketed aspect of the game, not the one-shot NPCs who are never to be seen again. So, this is what I personally want when I talk about events being temporary. It's not so much the specific event festivals I wish to be permanent, but the writing style that these events have, which seems to be lacking in the permanent contents of the game. However, if this was all the events brought to the table, it still wouldn't be much of a discussion. We also have the character development. Call a social anxiety episode should not be relegated to a temporary event, and neither should Albedo's backstory. So people often cite the sheer storage size of Genshin Impact as the reason we can't have these nice things, but the truth is there should be plenty of space, with the 54 character quests in the game. It's just not being utilized well. I myself would gladly give up those 54 character quests in exchange for larger scale inclusive mini arcs like the Interdarshan Championship. I'd prefer fewer stories which are much bigger in scope than a large number of stories mainly isolated to just one character. And well, the good news is that, even right now, those things already exist in some capacity. The 2.7 Chasm quest, you know, the one featuring Xiao, Ito, Shinobu, Yelan, and Yanfei being trapped underground, to me, that quest played like an event quest. It just took this kind of random cast of characters together, and made a mini story out of it and made it work. It was an especially good quest for Yanfei, who didn't have much screen time. Nothing in the Archon quests, no story quests, no hangout, yet at this point I don't feel as though she needs one. There's also the 2.4 Archon interlude for rebuilding the Jade Chamber. It played more like an Archon quest, but it pretty much gave us everything we needed about Shenhe. You'd rather have this for Shenhe than some janky story quest where Shenhe tries her best not to brutally murder a random one-shot NPC villain, or something. Another one is the 3.3 interlude for Scaramouche, which, while mostly limited to just Nahida and Scaramouche for characters, is another situation like Shenhe where I felt a story quest was unnecessary. He had the character arc you wanted, and the story also contributes to the wider narrative, giving us important information about Piero de Torre and our twin sibling. So, if we cannot make event stories permanent, then I would at least consider more stuff like this to be a compromise. So to summarize the whole thing, there's a lot of reasons why event stories are stuck in this situation. If storage space is a concern, then I think the problem lies with the underwhelming status of the story quests and hangouts in this game. The things that we like about the events: large-scale gathering of playable characters, the building of relationships between said characters, and key story moments that could all be theoretically implemented in the permanent sections of the game that we have now. Yet it's largely absent because we instead have way too many isolated one-shot stories where we follow a single playable character around and watching them deal with one-shot NPCs who almost never show up again. This is just, I think, the development route that Hoyo has taken in terms of permanent content for characters. But in those rare moments when they actually do go through with it, it's worked out pretty well. But that's it for this video, guys. Let me know your thoughts. This is a hot topic with a very wide range of discussion. What do you think about the events, the story quests, and making more of the stuff permanent? Anyways, we're going through some changes on our content creation journey. I'm trying to get back into streaming and expanding my long-neglected social media network. For the YouTube channel, we're trying to pivot to more frequently uploaded content. This script took way too long to make. I had to rewrite it several times, which was why I took so long. I plan on uploading more frequently on top of trying to get better at everything, but I'm feeling much better now than I did in December when some of my videos blew up. I swear, there will be no more 2-month absences without a single upload. Thank you for your patience, and I'll see you all next time.